Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Psilocybin Says. My name is Courtney Rose, and if this is your first time tuning into Psilocybin Says, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for taking a shot on our show. I think this is a fantastic first shot to take. This episode is so good. Eric got the opportunity to interview Leah Gerstorff, who is a fellow psychedelic podcaster and a fellow Louisville native. We had the opportunity to go to her and her co-host Christine's in-home studio a few months back and had a really great down-to-earth conversation with both of them. And we've been in touch ever since. And so this conversation was one in which I was really looking forward to and then ended up getting the flu. So it was just Eric and Leah on this episode. Because believe me, you do not want to hear what this mama sounds like with the flu. You can already get a taste of it right now. I'm still recovering almost 2 weeks later. So I'm just going to take a moment to give a big ol' shout out to anyone and everyone who has been sick recently or is currently sick. You know what? You're doing great. You're doing great. I know you feel crazy. I know it feels like nothing makes sense and everything is confusing and you can hear your echo of your own voice inside of your head. And it's so weird, but you know what? It's going to pass. You're going to come out better. You're going to come out stronger and you're going to have a new perspective on things and it'll all make sense soon. So just hang in there. You're doing great. So anyway, all that to say, I had serious FOMO that day when I couldn't make this conversation. Leah is a mother. She's an entrepreneur. She's recently started on this journey of psychedelic wellness and spirituality, and that includes with mushrooms and a recent experience at a local ayahuasca church in Greensboro, Kentucky, which she talks about on this episode. She also shares some things about being a mom and entering into this new psychedelic space and how this is felt navigating with family and friends and those dynamics. She shared about her perspective on working with plant medicine with her children and her spouse. And she even touches on autism and psychedelics, which is a topic we really don't hear about a ton yet. But there's actually some really interesting research that was done like 50 plus years ago on autism and LSD. And there's just so much more to discover there. But I really love how Leah just keeps it down to earth and she has such a welcoming vibe. So please, if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify and you enjoy the episode, give us that 5-star rating. Oh, we'd be so grateful. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, make sure to like this video, subscribe. We release new podcasts on YouTube and all the other podcast places every single week. Make sure to comment, let us know what you found most interesting. And we're so grateful to have you here. So I hope you enjoy this podcast and I hope you just have an awesome rest of your day.
Leah, welcome to Psilocybin Says.
Hi.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Podcaster to podcaster.
Oh, yeah.
So we meet again.
We meet again. Tables have turned.
You have a much nicer studio, and that's okay.
You know how people joke about like a man cave? This is my podcast cave.
I am so freaking jealous of it. I'm not even joking.
You should come back because we've done a lot more to it. I'm like, this is literally turning into like my happy place. My honestly, like it's becoming a very nice tripping room.
I was gonna ask if you have done any dosing down there.
I absolutely have. I'm trying to get a bean bag down here and
yeah.
some LED lights and yeah, totally.
Very good. Very good. All right. That's what I like to hear. Yeah. So you have been on quite a journey here in the last, what would you call it since you really stepped into this world?
I would call it a trip.
Well, I mean, time-wise, yeah, time-wise though. How long?
Well, I would say my first mushroom journey was 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
June of 2020, and it has been a wild ride ever since. I think I really kind of dove into it hardcore. But I think what's interesting is I knew I wanted to start a podcast around it, but no one else wanted to. I was like, why doesn't anybody else want to talk about this with me? And someone came along who kind of had the same, like, why is no one talking about this? We should do this. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I've been wanting to do this. Absolutely. But I think since then, we started our podcast in March, April, and the people that we've had on, the experts that we've had on, you've been on, Courtney's been on, just hearing other people's stories, hearing from the experts, that in itself has been such a learning experience. And it's really been a huge, I want to call it like part of an integration process of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've learned so much from so many different people, and I come out of every episode like, like it's a trip. Like every episode feels like I'm going on a journey with someone.
Yeah, I love that. When I had the wonderful opportunity to record with Duncan Trussell, he told me that he saw himself as kind of like a shaman of sorts, or he really said he was a bus driver, and that he was as
Ah,
a podcaster, as a conversationalist, you're kind of you're holding and creating this space to go on some kind of a journey together. You may have an idea of where you're trying to get to, like the topics that you wanted to discuss and all that, but what you encounter along the way is often much more beautiful than the destination itself.
I so I want to admit something, because when we first had you on, Christine and I were both like, you're so intimidating because you are. I know, right? Like I feel very oh, because we felt like such babies in the space next to you. And while I still feel like I don't have as many well, I mean, this is a fact. I don't have as many journeys under my belt as a lot of people do, but just hearing from other people, kind of like what you're saying, like hearing all the stuff from other people has kind of given me like more than a head start. I feel like I don't
Mhm.
need to do as many journeys as some people might need to do, because I'm learning from here and from there and from here and from there. So it's kind of nice. Yeah.
Oh, that is so true. That's so true. And that's, as I've worked with people and kind of training them to be practitioners, what I've always said is like, you can get so much further, so much faster than I did just by leveraging what I've learned. And the same thing goes. And that's really what, we're in this cleric training. We just wrapped up this last round of cleric training, and one of the concepts that, you know, I really try to embody is that a good teacher is ultimately here to make themselves useless. You want to give away all of your information so that others can come, and then they teach you, and then you become a student again, in this beautiful journey, this beautiful kind of cycle that we're on together. And yeah, psychedelics really exemplify that. And we've had so little contact with these medicines for so long. We all have a lot of catching up to do.
Hmm. Yeah. There's a book I read after psychedelics, The Warrior of the Light. It's written by the same, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name, The Alchemist, Don Luis.
Oh,
Is that who that is?
I know. No, you're talking about,
Paulo,
not.
Paulo Cohen or something.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
In He wrote The Alchemist, but there's another book he wrote called The Warrior of the Light. And one of the things it says is, a warrior really shares their stories around the campfire. They don't
Mhm.
hold their secrets to the battles in. They share it with other people. And I was listening to something one time. A lot of people have this weird thing with the word shaman. Like when
Mhm.
other people call themselves shamans, or, they're like, how dare he say that? Or
Oh,
how dare
I
she
get
say that?
cringy. I'm like, "Oh, hold up. Who are you? Wait." But go
Right.
ahead. Go ahead.
And
I'm
so
open my mind.
no, it kind of said, a shaman is someone who walked through the fire and is sharing their story and how they got to the other side of it. And
Mhm.
it kind of gave me this new like, oh, okay. So like I don't have to say I'm not saying nobody's ever called me a shaman. I've never called myself a shaman, but I see it different now,
Mm,
you know.
mhm,
Um Similar to we were talking before we got started, we just did this ayahuasca journey. He's kind of gotten the nickname the trailer park shaman.
mhm,
And when we say that, people are like, "Oh, I hate it when people call themselves shamans." I was like, "I don't think he calls himself that." And he doesn't. I asked
mhm,
him. He was like,
mhm.
"I've never said that. That's what people call me." But it just gets in people's heads. Like he thinks he's better than everybody. He thinks he's a shaman. And he's really just kind of sharing something.
Oh man. All right. So let's just blow this open because this is something that I actually just made a big LinkedIn post about this today. We recorded a podcast a couple weeks about this. It's something that I have experienced in my own self and that I see in the wider psychedelic community is this kind of um, segmenting off of different types of practitioners and the criticisms of us all towards each other.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably one of the greatest hurdles to real progress in the movement. And I'm looking at my own self honestly and how I have at times, more often than not, honestly, been critical of the clinical approach or the therapeutic approach or whatever you want, the Michael Pollan style kind of thing. And then those who call themselves shamans. And we're really limiting ourselves by allowing language
Hmm.
to create such a barrier that we can't share information and everybody benefit equally.
Yeah. We noticed that, not going to call anyone out, but in some of our episodes, there's a lot of resistance in the medical community to the
Sure.
underground community.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh my God.
There's so
Yeah.
much like there's like an elitist like you know I think in one of our episodes someone said something about like we're getting ahead of the medicine and afterwards we're like, but people have been working with this medicine for so long. Like, how are we getting ahead of it? But you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
so there's a lot of resistance. And I feel exactly what you're saying. Like there's
So,
people.
but you and Christine are in such a great position to maybe um, provide more of a middle ground. And I wonder, how do we do that? How can we do that? And it's from my experience, it's been working with clinicians that opened them up to my process and opened me up to their process a little bit more.
Yeah.
But when we don't have the ability to really be necessarily hands on with each other, how do we facilitate a larger dialogue where there is more honesty and vulnerability within the entire community?
I think that just not it's very easy to think the way that you're doing it is the right way and the other I get it. Like, the way that I did my first mushroom ceremony, I was like, this is the way it has to be done because I had such a great experience. And then since then I've realized like, oh, there are so many more ways to do this than going out in the woods and pooping in the woods. It was a great
It's
experience. I was
wonderful. Yes, I do
out.
recommend that everyone try that at least once.
Exactly. Like I was gonna say, like that was a wonderful experience and I wouldn't have had it any other way. But now I'm like, I'd rather do it at home in my bed. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean,
so
I may still have a preference for the woods and the shovel. I don't know.
I might be a little bougie. So I'll own it. I'll own it.
Takes all kinds. Takes all
Yeah.
kinds.
So I think that that's like, okay, for example, like right now, you're right. Like we talk to a lot of people from both ends, like the underground, the above ground, the medical side, the therapist side who aren't quite PhDs and doing ketamine treatments, but understand the importance of psychedelics and integrating those experiences and creating a safe place for people to come back home to. However, there's resistance in all of them.
Yeah. Yep.
And we're kind of we're the middle ground. We're the ones listening and bringing the information forward. And I think what's important is to just maybe sit with what feels right for you. And, if going to the woods is what you feel like you're being drawn to, then maybe a clinical setting isn't the right one for you.
Mhm.
But I don't think there should be this butting of heads.
So how do we diffuse that from the practitioner side? I completely agree that those who
Yeah.
are approaching the medicine, whatever feels right, but
Yeah.
then, yeah, so as this is becoming to my awareness, I'm wondering, okay, like how do I, aside from acknowledging my own criticisms
Right.
and trying to open a conversation up in the way that I can, what can we do that's even more meaningful and has more of a real impact? Because I truly think that look at it, if all of these approaches would just respect each other equally, and we would fucking destroy any barriers that were in front of us. But right
Yeah.
now, it's like half the people are trying to, like, if you see what happened in Oregon, there's like
Yeah.
this gatekeeping still.
I think the best way to approach it, my opinion, is just realizing we're all on the same team. Like we're not like offense and defense. Like we're literally all fighting for the same thing. So
Mhm.
if you can reach people your way, then someone else can reach people another way. There's a lot of people are like, oh, I hate when celebrities start talking about doing psychedelics because we put them on a pedestal. And the way I see it is, right, people put them on a pedestal, so use it.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
if they're coming out about Aaron Rodgers coming out about using ayahuasca, if people are going to put him on a pedestal and be like, well, if he's doing it, then maybe it's not so bad. Then
Mhm.
use that. Don't
Yeah.
hate it.
For sure, for sure. But even though I've been guilty myself, can we take a minute just to highlight Mike Tyson? It really, did you
Yeah.
s- did you happen to see the U.S. Open where he was so obviously tripping balls in the
Oh, no, I didn't see
oh,
that.
he's like in the stands and he's just like laughing to himself and he like talking and
Oh,
he
no.
is so, and I just like, after I saw that, I was like, there could not be a better human being than the biggest, blackest, scariest tattoo on your face, I will bite off your ear, motherfucker, to say, this is our God-given right. Go ahead and stop me.
Right.
I'm like, yes, Mike
Yeah.
Tyson. He will fucking kick everybody's ass and protect our mushrooms.
Yes, yes. And he's also like, "Peace and love."
And he's also just like, peace and love until you mess with him on the airplane too much. You see that? Did
Right,
you see that?
right. No, I didn't see that
Oh,
either, and
yeah,
I love
those,
Mike
there's
Tyson.
this guy, there's this dude on the airplane that, recognizes Mike Tyson and starts saying, "Oh, Mike Tyson's trying to sell me shrooms. Mike Tyson's trying to sell me shrooms." And then he gets behind him and he starts throwing a cup or something at him. And Mike Tyson finally turns down and just pummels this dude in his face. He's like, "Look, dude,
Oh,
I may be peaceful and I got limits like everybody else."
right, right. Okay, so let's take this back to like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Sorry.
No, I'm gonna take this back to like the Will Smith thing.
Okay,
I
okay.
had a conversation in an Uber with the driver about he was talking about ayahuasca, and then he brought up, well, Will Smith says he's done it this many times and it obviously didn't help him.
Mm,
And I was like, well, here's the thing, like we're all still human.
mhm,
We're all still triggered. We're all going to have outbursts or, react in ways that don't align with what we believe we should be doing. Um, I guess the change that I saw is he removed himself from the academy. He apologized for what he did. He held himself accountable. And to me, that is growth.
yes.
So it's that like holding people to the standard that they're not allowed to be human. They're not allowed to make mistakes. Like we 100% do. We
God,
just
yes.
own them
Yes.
a little
100.
better.
100%. And that's, a big part of this conversation in trying to bridge the gap between the different models is that, if that's what I've tried to do, at least in this instance right now, is acknowledge my mistakes. And so now, like, let's move forward with some kind of reconciliation. And
Right.
isn't that another disservice that we're doing in the psychedelic community by in any shape, form, or fashion, kind of pretending that psychedelics are going to fix us or make us superhumans who never make mistakes. And all of a sudden we've ascended to the angelic realms.
Right, right. Like, we haven't ascended. Like,
No.
we're not, we are, but we're not God.
Yes, I know.
Sounding a little elitist. My bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not claiming to be better than anybody else. So why are we pretending, or why are we trying to say that the way that we're doing it is better than what anybody else is doing, I guess.
It's just another tool in the kit,
Yeah. Yeah.
albeit a very profound one. So was this your first experience with ayahuasca?
It was.
All right, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So Steve Hupp of ayaquest, we had him on, I think, back in June, and he invited us to do a ceremony. And the weird thing is, like, I feel like this is always how it works when psychedelic. I think I remember hearing you say this, or maybe it was in like a Sunday service with Sanctuary. Somebody said something one time that really stuck with me. Like, when psychedelics call, you answer. When you get the answer, you hang up the phone. So I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense, because I had been called to ayahuasca for a while. I had been researching places, looking places up, and then he offers this ceremony in the middle of our episode, and I'm like, oh my God, like crying, because I'm like, you have no idea. Like, I've literally been like looking into this for so long. So it was just like, this is my call. Like, I need to answer this. So yeah, I know a lot of people, even like my psychiatrist, who I love, who sits with ayahuasca all the time, was very like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, you sure you're okay with this? And I just knew, like, I knew it was right. I felt good about it. I trust my intuition, and I know it's not right for everybody. And some people prefer the going to the jungle, Costa Rica, Jamaica, wherever. And, for my first experience, I was like, it would be nice if I could just like drive a couple of hours and not spend thousands and thousands of dollars. And it can be a nice little intro. Doesn't mean I'm not going to do that other experience one day. I will. Putting that out there, I absolutely will. But it was a nice little intro. And for my first time with ayahuasca, I really think that's the way it was supposed to be. Like, I was with a really small group, it was just 4 of us. We all knew each other going in, and we've kind of gotten closer coming out. The experience was 2 nights. First night we did a microdose. Second night we did the full dose. And I'm still kind of processing a lot. You've done ayahuasca, right? I think the biggest difference for me is I still think mushrooms are my medicine, if that makes any sense. Like,
Oh yeah.
those are going to be my go-to always. I just have a curiosity with other ones. I just want to like taste them. Like, let me see what that one tastes like. Let me see what that one does. But I will always go back to mushrooms.
What'd you think about the taste of ayahuasca?
It literally tasted like poop. The nastiest stuff you've ever put in your mouth, ever.
Indeed.
One of the girls is like, it tastes like chocolate. And we're like, shut the fuck
my
up.
God.
Like, stop saying that. It was gross. Coming up, it wasn't as bad. Which is so weird. Like, it didn't taste as bad coming up, which I'm like, how is that even possible? But I think I'm still piecing things together. And I think after a mushroom journey, I remember everything so vividly. And I can still remember my first journey. And it's very like, this seems like I'm trying to put together a blackout drunk night.
Wow, it's the opposite for me.
Wow.
Has been, yeah. Ayahuasca was very, very clear. I remembered every detail. Still do, down to the thoughts that I was having. And mushrooms, not so much. No, there's a lot of blackout, missing time there, and ongoing. Yeah.
Really? That's interesting.
We're all so different, and that's another thing about this is we we just cannot generalize in psychedelics.
You're exact like, it's not the medicine, like, it's really
There's
just
there's so many factors.
yeah,
So
that
many
makes a lot of
factors.
sense. I remember pieces of it.
Mhm.
I remember coming out the next day and being like, "Oh my god, I was, like, so blissed out. I was just laying there with a smile on my face the whole time," and they were like, "No, you weren't. You were fucking sobbing." I was like, "Out loud? You guys heard me crying?" And they were like, "You weren't crying, you were sobbing." So,
Wow.
I didn't remember that part.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
it's almost like maybe I don't need to remember that part,
Mhm,
and maybe
mhm.
I only need to remember the good.
Yeah, or it may come back up later when you're more ready for it, you know? These experiences certainly have a way of unfolding for years and years, which is a beautiful aspect of them. So talk about you spoke a little bit about Steve and the way he operates, and I'm really interested in bringing that into the conversation, particularly around ayahuasca because it's so very ceremonialized. Yeah,
Um,
expand there.
I think they just kind of put their own spin on their traditions and the ceremonial aspect of it, and the way that he described it, it reminded me a little bit about how you guys in the episode you did with us talked about being in Jamaica and doing these retreats in Jamaica and then people coming back home to real life and not really having a way to like merge what
Mhm,
they just learned with the life that they're living.
mhm.
He almost makes it like it's easier to come back to real life because you never really left
Yeah,
the real life, if that makes any sense.
total sense.
So I think he's a character. He was a bank robber.
Mhm.
He drops a lot of fuck bombs. Like he's just fucking real, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so when you meet him, you're like, "Oh my god, like he's like just a normal person." There's no like you don't feel like intimidated by him. And I think with a lot of ceremonial shamans, I do personally. I'm like, "Oh my god, they know so much and I know so little," like,
Mhm.
bowing down to them, and this was not like that at all. But I think a lot of people were more afraid of the setting that we were gonna be in because it's this, like, church in the middle of, Greensburg, Kentucky,
Mhm.
and it didn't scare me because 'cause I'm like, "Y'all, I grew up in trailer parks, like, I'm sleeping on a cot. That's not a big deal. If I did it the other way, I'd be in the jungle," you
Mm,
know?
right, right, right.
So, apparently I have a problem with, like, sleeping in a bed, like, having
Well,
access to a restroom.
there's really, though, a ton of value in, talking about, again, expanding these experiences out beyond not just kind of the medical, um, design, but even outside of the traditional, so to speak, or the indigenous design. That's one of the things that I was very intentional about in Jamaica and still am, is we are not those people. We are not the Oaxacans. We are not Central American Mayans who that tradition is long and rich, and there's so much to be learned from that. But it has to be applied, or it's more, I believe it to be more effectively applied through our lens.
Right. I think that's the thing, like, ritual sometimes scares people, especially if they're, like, newer to the space.
Hmm, hmm.
And, I don't know if you watched his show on Vice, there it showed a lot of, like, interaction between him or his wife and the people taking the medicine. It wasn't like that at all. I'm like, that was just the show.
Mm, okay.
Um, they didn't show the people when they were, like, in the medicine. You know what I'm saying? Like, when we were in it, they
Mm-hmm.
stayed back. They were there to talk
Okay.
afterwards. That was it. And I think that that's kind of the way it should be.
Okay, yeah, great. That's wonderful to hear. Yeah, I didn't. I'd had kind of preconceptions about him, and you hear him known as the trailer park shaman, and even
Right.
myself, you just like formulate this. He's got feathers over top of people and stuff while they're tripping, and so that's wonderful to hear. And I think that there's a lot of space for that approach.
Yeah, and I think for some people that would be an uncomfortable setting for them. Like,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
loved it. I was fine with it.
Man, another thing that we don't really talk about in this whole thing too much is personal responsibility. Like you are responsible to research and know what you're getting yourself into, and
Right.
whatever the approach is. And so I think that's something that we could really talk about more. So, do you think that you all could host a big podcast conference with a bunch of different practitioners, and we could all have a conversation about?
Maybe, like, try to get everybody together, like, "Guys, we're on
Yeah.
the same team here."
I want to do it. I feel like it's impossible or challenging for me to do it as the founder of a psychedelic church, because then there's, this is how we do it. So I would love to be a part of that conversation, but don't know that I'm the best one to necessarily facilitate it. So
Right.
you
Okay.
all are in a good spot. I'm just saying, if you want to, we can
Like,
bring
we're
heat.
you're kinda right, like, we're very, like, neutral,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
love it.
I
I
in
love it.
this.
You came into this and were like, "Holy shit, let's dive into this world and understand it better from every side."
Yeah,
And most people, it seems like most of us come into this and we're just like, "I'm gonna do it my way,"
right,
So
right, and I
I
think that
really
that's
respect.
we're like the Joe Rogans of,
We'll
not in
talk
a
to
we
anybody.
love Joe Rogan, but, like, he gets a lot of, like, hate because of the people he has on,
Mhm.
so it's just we had somebody on and we loved everything they had to say, and then we have someone else on and we love everything they have to say, and then we, like, go back and forth, and, we're just bringing the information out. That's it.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
it. The different
Mhm.
sides, the different angles, the underground, the above ground, and, yeah, we're kind of like the neutral, like, "Just tell us how you do it." That's it.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So I intentionally wore my local Kentucky. This is from the Buy Local Fair in 2015. You ever go to the Buy Local Fair down the
No,
waterfront? Oh, it's
no.
fucking great. It's fucking great. This was the year I was arrested. Right after this festival, we were arrested. I didn't even realize that till I was getting ready to say, like, "Oh yeah," and I was like, "Oh shit, that's 2015. That's kind of weird." But anyway, we're both here in Louisville,
Yeah,
and we're both parents.
yeah.
And however, I've been the dreadlocked psychedelic microphone guy for a long time. You and Christine are pretty new to the public kind of sphere and psychedelia. I'm curious, first and foremost, locally, how that's playing out for you as parents in particular.
Yeah. So, I want to say first and foremost, I think that Christine and I are very lucky to be able to talk about these things. There's a lot of people who can't. A lot of people who are in this space even who can't
Mhm,
publicly
mhm,
talk about it. We're both our own bosses, so we're not afraid of being fired or our boss is finding out or being
mhm,
judged at work. Like, I talk about it at work, so most of my clients know this about me. Um, I have a very hard time, like, relating to parents of my children,
mhm,
who aren't familiar with this space or even open to understanding it. There's, like, a lot of, let's get together and have these mommy wine play dates, and I just don't do that. I never have.
mhm,
But that's not, like, a new thing since psychedelics. That's, like, I've never done the whole mommy wine culture. That's never been
mhm,
me.
mhm,
I think we're rocking some worlds, and, there's this, "Oh my god, they're moms."
mhm.
And I'm like, "Yeah, and we're okay." Like, actually,
Mhm,
we're better than okay. We're better moms because of it, you know? And I would even like, we're my husband and I are better parents because of it.
mhm.
Like,
Yes.
he's sober and 18 months sober, and that'll rock some people's world because 'cause I'm like, "No, he doesn't, drink or do drugs anymore, but he does mushrooms." And
Mhm, mhm,
and it helps him. And it's helped both of us, be more present with our kids. Um, I'm more in tune with what my kids need. Um, I'm gonna rewind this a little bit because in my ayahuasca trip, Mother Ayahuasca was telling me what my kids needed from me that I wasn't
mhm,
giving them. And I
mhm.
was like,
Mm.
Like, here I am thinking I'm doing the best, and I'm doing the best that I can. That's what all of us are doing. But hearing her tell me exactly what they needed,
Mm.
I went home literally the night we got back, and I cuddled with my 10-year-old on the
Mhm.
couch
Mhm.
because I hadn't done that in a very long time. I didn't know he needed it. Like, we're better parents because of this. And we're not, this is something that keeps coming up, the girls' weekends away, the moms' trips, like trying to escape our lives. I used to do that all the time. Couldn't wait for 3-day girls' weekend to get away from my husband and away from my kids and away from my life and just drink the whole weekend. And we don't do that anymore because I'm not trying to escape it.
Mhm.
Like, I'm living in every moment and I love it. I love
Mhm.
it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So how can that be wrong?
Oh, that was so beautifully said.
I just I wish more people understood, why we do this. And I mean, I'm trying to explain why, but there's still a lot of judgment around it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, have you had direct comments made to you here?
Um, I haven't personally. I know that Christine has,
Mm.
but I can feel it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
I can feel, like, when people get really uncomfortable. But, I will say this, this is so interesting to me. People who you thought didn't understand it in the beginning, they're starting to reach out.
Yeah.
They're starting to ask questions. They're messaging me like, "Hey, I know you have this podcast. What do you know about this?" And I'm like, "Oh, now you're interested? Okay. All right." So, we're not here to like preach at anybody or tell anybody how to do their life. We're just living our life the way that we are. And by doing that, people are getting curious. That's it.
That's all you gotta do, really.
That's
That's
all
all we gotta
really, that's all you
do.
have to do. I'm not here to force anybody's hand.
What about with your children? Have you discussed this topic directly with any of them?
Um, so I used to have a podcast about cannabis, and this was like in 2019. And that came up with my kids then
Mhm.
because I had all these books about cannabis. And I remember my now 10-year-old was like, "What's cannabis?" And I was like, "It's a medicine, and we've had very basic conversations around it. I haven't had a sit down formal conversation with them because they haven't asked.
Mm.
But my 10-year-old, he's my curious one. Like, my 14, almost 15-year-old, like, doesn't give a shit. Like, he can see you saying or doing something and, look the other way. And he's just
Mm.
not curious. But I'll have the conversation with him when the time is right. I know that. But
Mhm.
yeah, my mushroom stuff. Yeah, I do. And he was like, "Why are you so obsessed with mushrooms?" And this was like recent. I was like, "Well, some people like to drink and collect whiskey and alcohol and bottles and this is what I like. Like, it helps me be a better mom and it's a medicine for me." So, very basic. Like, you don't
Excellent.
need to make it more complicated than that.
Totally. Here's a Johns Hopkins study.
Right. I'm like, "Can somebody make a book about mushroom
Oh
for
god.
kids?"
Yes. I have been for a couple of years now, I've been thinking like a kid's book, a kid's
Yeah,
psychedelic, and not directly
right.
psychedelic, but kinda, it's sowing the seeds. I don't know if you heard recently, this it is relevant. It's a powerful, subject, but there was a young man in New Albany, I believe, across the river who just, died in a car wreck, and he was on some kind of psychedelic. Not sure what yet. We've been asked to possibly talk to the school. It's a Montessori school. Um, and it's long been a dream of mine to have some kind of legitimate drug education program rather than
Yeah,
this bullshit dare stuff that we grew
yeah.
up with. So this may be an opening for that, but it's incredible. Right this week as well, I'm also working very closely. There's a member of ours who's within the final days of his life from stage 4 cancer, and we did a ceremony with him a few weeks back, and uh, just being at his bedside the last few days has been really powerful. And then to have this tragedy occur as well, from the misuse of psychedelics, it just highlights how much education there still is to do,
Mhm.
from the stigma that's around it, the misuse, and the potential for harm to come out of it. Fortunately, this school is having an honest conversation with their students and not condemning his behavior or condemning the drugs or plants themselves, which is really admirable and kind of surprising out of
Yeah.
Southern Indiana and Kentucky here. But doesn't it kind of feel like we're in a? To me, it feels oddly right that there is such a growing psychedelic movement here in Kentucky. I feel like Louisville and Southern Indiana, I know it's big all around.
Right.
But like when we came back from Jamaica, got here, and after a few days, I was kind of like, huh, okay, this is actually why we're back, because there is an energy here that is welling up, I believe, and I feel. And there's so many mushroom cultivators around the Spore Art Studios, and you
Mhm.
all are doing your podcast, and it and then there's, I think, 3 ayahuasca churches here in Kentucky.
Mhm.
So it have you given that much thought?
Uh, I just kind of thought that that was like this bubble, and there's other bubbles everywhere else. But it
Mhm.
does kind of shock me. But I see both ends of it too, because, I still work with clients with my other business. I'm an esthetician, and sometimes I'll be in a conversation and I'll mention psychedelics and they're like, "What? No, that's not a thing." And I'm like, "Oh my God, yes, it is." Like,
Mhm.
where have
Mhm.
you been? Like, this has been a thing. So sometimes I'm like, is it just my bubble that I'm seeing it
Right.
all in, or, my circle that it's everywhere? Nobody does everybody see this, or is it just us? You know? So, yeah, I remember this particular client being like, "Oh, well, they'll never make it legal." And I was like, "There, it's already on the way." Like,
Yeah.
you
2
know,
states
um
now, yeah.
right, and she was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, does nobody else know this stuff?" So,
It's baffling to me. It's always been so baffling that something being labeled illegal has such a profound impact on how we view it.
yeah, yeah,
It's like alcohol. You just brought about like bourbon here in Kentucky. Like it's fucking bourbon
yes,
everywhere. And it's
yes,
it's it's goddamn deadly. Like we see
yes.
families ruined. I growing up in Washington County and all out there around Maker's Mark distilleries, and like just families decimated by alcohol.
So, this is interesting because my I keep going back to my 10-year-old. He's the only one who, like, he's like me. He likes to know everything about everything, which I
Mhm,
love.
mhm.
Um, it used to drive me crazy because he asked so many whys all the time, and I'm like, "Just because," but now I'm like, "Oh, he's like my tiny genius." Well, your kids are your greatest teachers.
Uh,
I'm like, "Shit,
absolutely.
he's just like me." Um, but, he came home from school one day and he was just like, "Did you know that, sugar's a drug?" And
Ah,
I was like,
yes.
"How did you learn that in school?" And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "I learned that, like, everything you put into your body can be a drug." And I'm like,
Mm,
"Yes. Thank you for that," because that word drug scares so many people. And
mhm,
Christine and I have talked about it on our podcast. Coffee's a drug. Soda's a drug. Sugar's a drug. Tylenol's a drug. Like, just because of the word, there's, like, such a negative tie
mhm,
to what we're doing. And what's interesting is, like, even the legalities of it. Like, yes, it's illegal for now. It's a Schedule I substance, but you know what else is illegal? Underage drinking. You know what else is illegal? Taking someone else's pain meds, you know, or
breaking the speed limit, you
yes,
know? Which is
So
actually considerably more dangerous than psychedelics.
yes, yes. So there's that whole, like, just because it's illegal, like alcohol was also illegal at one point.
Right.
But it's so much more dangerous for us, but also so normalized. So we want to talk about like the parenting side of this. I kind of want to touch on that.
Mhm.
Um, my kids I haven't drank in like 6 years, but my kids haven't seen my husband drinking in 18 months. And we have an unfinished bar in our basement because we started it before we got sober.
Oh,
And now it's
wow.
like, shit, what do we do with this
Oh,
space?
hmm.
But, a friend of ours, their teenagers just got caught drinking and they're so upset. And I'm like, but you guys drink every weekend. Like, you guys create, like, you go to concerts and you drink with your kids and you do this and you drink with your kids and you do that and you're drinking in front of your kids. Why is that shocking to you? You've normalized it from the time that they were born to the time that they're teenagers. Why wouldn't they be curious
So
and
true.
get into your liquor cabinet? So why aren't you having a conversation with them about it? Is it because if you have a conversation with them about it, you're going to have to admit it's good for you? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
so I guess that's like the normalization. I think I'm not lying to my kids. I'm being honest with them when it comes up. And
Mhm.
I do feel like there has to be a better way for me to have these conversations with them. Haven't quite figured it out yet. But that's a start. Like, let's talk about the word drug and what it means. Let's talk about what's safe and what isn't safe. And I would like to think that if I create this space with my children that makes them feel safe enough to talk to me, then we can have that conversation when the time is right.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking with my 19-year-old, just I keep rejoicing in this. My 19-year-old son, we were separate for about almost 7 years. He went to live with his mother, and he and I had, when he was 14, I dosed him with psilocybin a couple times in Jamaica, and then he had a few doses here by himself and some LSD. Excuse me. And then we kind of separated for a little bit, and he's recently been he moved back in with us, and it's been just the greatest joy of my life. I had no idea how much I was missing that. But the conversation that we were having yesterday, he is very experienced and very, very wise to the safety of drugs. He actually, um, about a year ago, I was in Jamaica and got a call and had to come home because he was in a coma. He had accidentally overdosed on fentanyl and came within a hair's breadth of passing away. And he since then has just become a new person, and he's so intuitive. He's always been so empathic and intuitive, but it's at a level now that it just continually blows me away. And he is able to communicate very well the risks and benefits of different drugs. And so I was talking to him yesterday saying, maybe you're the one to we develop together this drug education program somehow, because who better to talk to 15-year-olds than a 19 or 20-year-old,
Right.
someone they
Right.
can aspire to. And so, it was years ago before I started Myco, before anything. It was kind of I felt very strongly that if mothers in particular would stand up and herald the benefit of psychedelics, that it would bring about a massive cultural transformation. You are the hinge point of it all, like my wife was sick this week and the whole house goes to fucking hell. I do shit. Like I'm not a couch husband, you know what I'm saying? But like everything revolves around the mother,
Yeah.
and what an honored place that is. And it's also, probably why so many women were shaman, this access point to other worlds, to the intuitive self, to the heart space. And so I really, really commend you and Christine both for being very public and very bold in bringing this conversation forward.
Well, what you're saying about the mothers, I have been feeling recently, like there's, it's funny talking to you about this, but like there's definitely this shift in women kind of taking on the lead of this healing space.
Mm-hmm.
And the men are just kind of either following or falling off.
Mm-hmm.
And, you were in this space before you met Courtney. So I'm like, you're one of the lucky ones.
For sure.
It was very much, me taking that first step and really kind of going into mushrooms with intention and realizing the potential that they had for growth, that I'm like, you either need to get on board or fall off, because seriously,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm moving on,
Mhm.
I'm growing, I'm healing, I'm different.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't change and if you can't get on board with this, then I need to be alone,
Mm-hmm.
So we are very powerful in that, we're creating this movement that I think has been stagnant for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Um,
it seems that historically, much of that suppression coincided with this, patriarchal domination. You
yeah,
saw what happened when the conquistadors came into South America, and just you can look around the world, and the mystery traditions are all very feminine in energy. So the suppression of it, everything has its kind of course to run and all of
right.
that. But I think that I don't know. We still got we still got some stuff to clean up. Don't get me wrong.
Totally.
The
They're
war
always
machine is yeah. But the balance is shifting, and it's beautiful. And I do very often. I look around me and I see how many amazing women are around me, and I'm like, yeah, I must be doing something right.
Yeah, there's definitely a shift. And, it's hearing you talk about your son, I think that's beautiful. I saw your post about him coming back in.
Mm,
Amazing. I have, maybe I haven't said this in a podcast. Maybe I've thought it, but I've been afraid to say it. But, my oldest is autistic. He's on the spectrum. So is my husband.
mm,
And since my husband started using psychedelics, there has been such a shift in the way that he connects with people.
mm,
And I've watched it. It's amazing. Like, he had such a hard time connecting before. So alcohol was the only way he knew how to connect. I have thought before, I'm like, I wanna I want my son to experience this
mhm,
when he's older. I want
mhm,
him to get the benefits of being able to, like, connect with people, because he has such a hard time connecting right now. And I'm
mhm,
saying this because it's such a weird thing to say to someone who doesn't understand. Like, "Yeah, I wanna dose my son."
mhm, mhm.
I would never do it without him knowing. We
Of
would
course.
talk to him about it. We would sit down with them about it. But so many people are like, "Oh my god, she's talking about giving her son psychedelics." But I'm like, "You give your children medication all the time."
Oh my God, all the
Like,
shit
are
that our
we gonna go
children
there?
no,
Like,
no.
really? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so how is this different, like, for him to have this one experience before he decides to go to college, so he knows whether or not he wants to go to college or not? Like, so he can find himself and
Meanwhile, let me pull this book off the shelf that I literally have beside me that documents the use of LSD in 5 to 15-year-olds in the 40s and had just incredible impact on autism in particular. Children that
yeah,
were self-mutilating and nonverbal, and they were giving them like 1,000 microgram doses.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and kids that had never spoken started to come out and talk because they've been assimilating all this knowledge, but they couldn't put it together to send it out. It's incredibly powerful. It's a book called Acid Dreams. It's over on the bookshelf, but
Okay.
there's a ton of research that was done with psychedelics and children in the 40s and 50s that was subsequently destroyed by the United States government. It's documented. It's 100%.
I would love to read that book. We had, a guest one time send us a white paper report on autism and ketamine, because they had been
Mm.
working with, autistic children using ketamine treatments,
Hmm.
and recording all the evidence and data. And we also just we have an interview coming up with his name is Aaron, but I can't remember his last name, but he wrote a book called Autism on Acid. Because he literally started getting into the psychedelic space and started realizing like what he was missing was this connective part. Like he was having a hard time connecting with other people, and he felt love for the first time. So he wrote this book, Autism on Acid. He's like a researcher now working with LSD and autism. And so I'm like, I think that this is incredible because it's kind of like bringing it back. Like, let's bring it back.
Yes.
So if you can, you know, give your child medication for ADHD, why can I not give my child something that would help him connect with people?
That we know it's good for brain health. We know it's good for you. It's non-addictive.
Right.
Traditional cultures, you know, in some cultures, ayahuasca was rubbed on the mother's nipple when the child took its first feeding.
Wow.
Yeah, just to go ahead and initiate. And which is another thing that we're missing as a culture is kind of initiation rites.
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, coming of age thing. Like, we don't do anything like that.
Yeah. So what's the and I'm sure there's multiple, but kind of what are some of the biggest ahas or surprises in the conversations that you've had in with such a diverse not audience, but subject that you're dealing with, the interviewees, if you will?
I guess so. I don't know if this is like an aha moment, but it definitely makes us feel less alone. And I think that this would be helpful for other people who are maybe just like starting on this journey. This is something that all of our guests have kind of talked to, whether before recording or after recording, but we've talked about it sometimes in the episodes, is how hard this is. How hard the journey of like healing is, how you lose friends, you lose family. You know, somebody the other day was like, it's not talked about enough. And I'm like, no, we talk about it a lot. But I guess it's like one of those things, like you can't prepare someone for parenthood until they become a parent. That to me is it's one of our, it's hard to say. It's not an aha moment, but I'm like, oh, everybody goes through this. Like this isn't, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask if you could kind of talk about some of that in your own personal experience.
Yeah. You know, we've maybe touched on it, but maybe not gone into a lot of detail. And maybe that's something that we can do in a future episode, Christine and I. But like, you know, the friends who we thought would be happy that we're moving forward in our lives and just being very like standoffish about it. And you're like, wait a minute, what? Like, how are they not happy for me? You know, and just losing the people that you thought would be your biggest cheerleaders. And it's hard to come back from that. Like when you see the way that people are with you, when you start doing all these things, the judgment that's there or the misunderstanding and not wanting to understand, that's hurtful. Like just the like, nope, don't want to hear about it. Not for me. And I'm like, I'm not.
Isn't it like there's something there to explore if you're not even willing to listen to a subject matter?
That's kind of the thing. I'm like, I'm not asking you to do it, but like if you're not even willing to understand where I am and why, you know, like there's that disconnect there, and it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, and even with family members, that's like probably one of the hardest.
Totally get it. Lost contact with my immediate family that's because of it. And it was something that comes to my mind quite a bit. And I'm going to ask you also to talk about one of these, not colloquialisms, but these catchphrases that's used that I've seen you all bring up in this conversation. But but so, you know, raised Catholic and the Bible's always there and they teach you all the Jesus. And there was a line to some paraphrased something like Jesus saying that if you're not willing to leave your mother and brothers behind, to go into the kingdom of heaven, then you're not worthy of the kingdom of heaven. And that's how I feel about this. Like, and that's not to try and equate our practice with some kind of, more godly, or this is heaven. I mean, the kingdom of heaven is what psychedelics show us, in my opinion, that it is
Mhm.
within us. We
Yeah.
have the universe is within us. And so that's a choice that, we all ultimately will have to make in one way or another. Are we willing to walk away from the worldly possessions and relationships that we hold dear in search for our higher truth?
Ooh.
So,
I was just saying that to someone the other day who's having a hard time with this is, I look at heaven different now because I grew up very religious too. I don't think that heaven is a place you go when you die. I think it's a place that happens now. Like you create it.
mhm.
It's peace within yourself. And then I took it a step further and I'm like, they talk about the rapture and I see that different. I'm like,
Mhm.
to me, the rapture is happening already. It's
Mhm.
always happening. It's the left behind. Like
Mhm.
I'm leaving a lot of people behind because
Mhm. Mhm.
they don't see what I see.
Yeah.
They don't see that there is heaven here on earth. And I'm like, Okay, if you can't see this, if you can't
Damn.
like it's here, it's right here. I want you to be able to see it, but if you can't and if you want to continue to live in hell, like I got to leave you behind. So to me,
Whew.
that's the rapture. And with what you're saying, it's connecting even more. Um, it's been a struggle even recently, and it's not my story to tell, but my husband's parents aren't really in support of him being sober. So it keeps happening. Like the people you think who would be your biggest supporters
God.
end up being the people who are trying to hold you back.
Isn't it it's God, that is so true. I can't believe that we're talking about this because this is such a prominent theme in my life as well right now. It's so true. Yeah, well,
And I'm like, I want everybody to come with me. Don't get me
oh,
wrong.
for sure,
Like,
for sure.
but I'm like, the door is open,
Mhm.
you
You gotta
know?
walk through it. You gotta walk through it.
Right,
And, that's it does there is so much heartache there, and all we can do is really feel that and honor it and know that that's an indication of our desire to be in heaven with our loved ones, you
right.
know?
And it feels very different than like, I'm like hearing this in my head right now. It's like the excommunications that happen, in churches where they're like, oh,
Mhm.
well, if you can't be this, then we can't talk to you. Like, especially in like Scientology, if you're not a Scientologist, like you're banned.
Mhm.
It's very different than that.
Mhm.
Nobody's banning anybody.
No, you're welcome to come along anytime. And
Right,
actually, well, the truth of the matter is, for at least in my perspective, is that you have no choice but to ultimately come along. It may take lifetimes, and
right,
that's fine. We've got all the time that exists. So
right,
take your time. It's fine. The sooner the better, in my opinion. But at the
right.
same
I wish you
time,
could come
you
with
know,
me.
I also have, yesterday was a really challenging, emotional day for me. I spent some of my day in hell yesterday, and so recognizing that we all are just continuing to, walk each other home, as our good friend Ram Dass would say.
That's what I feel like a lot of people struggle with is the idea that we just have this like rainbows and butterflies life. And I'm like, it's so much further than that. We still have to live our lives as humans.
Mhm.
There is still a lot of shit that happens, but I just think we have a different perception of it now.
Mm.
Like
Mhm.
we can handle it a little better. We don't spiral in it, and or if I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I'll catch myself spiraling, and sometimes my husband is regulated enough that he can catch me out of it. He can hold my
Mhm.
hand through it, and it
Mhm.
goes the other way. Sometimes he's spiraling and I can pull him through it, but,
Mhm.
we don't stay in those spirals for long.
Right. That's the question. Are you making an effort? I had excuse me. I'm gonna just lay this shit out here publicly. It feels so good to just like acknowledge my faults, and it's something I'm continuing to enjoy more and more. But yesterday I had this major kind of revelation. So, God, I'm gonna sound like an asshole for a minute, but
Say
I think
it.
by the end, hopefully, there'll be some redeeming qualities.
Okay.
But I've had this thing as long as I can remember. When my partner gets sick, I get annoyed. And I don't think I'm the only one. I think that this is particularly a male trait. I think men, we're so fucking weak and we always need our mommies when we're sick. And then when our mommy gets sick, we don't want to,
Yeah.
and it's pathetic. And that happened. And then, and Courtney said to me, I need you to understand that this does not feel good. And it confronted me with what I already knew was there. Because every time this happens, I'm just like, you're a fucking asshole. Why can't you just like show up and be the person that your partner needs you to be right now? And I don't know why it's always been just so difficult to do. And so she is the first person ever to say something. And she said something yesterday, and it sent me in a spiral, or I chose to dive into the spiral of self-loathing for a little while. And after I came out of it, I was in meditation. I'm reading this book, The Course in Miracles. Fucking incredible book. I haven't read a book like this in a long time. And it gives me a lot of insight into my behavior. And it was speaking so clearly to what I was experiencing yesterday. And for the first time ever, out loud, I acknowledged that I did this, and then I fucking hate it. I love my wife so much. She is the sunshine of my life. There's never been anybody who could hold a flame to her. And I treat her like this sometimes. And acknowledging that, saying that out loud, it felt like it was the step that got me over the hurdle so that I can actually make the improvements. And so that's just to speak to kind of a lot of what we've been kind of talking about in this conversation, is that to get through the light, we've got to go through the dark. And that's within our own professional communities, our personal communities, our families. And it's just so much of what psychedelics have taught me over the years. And I know that I'm, like you're saying, a much better husband and father because of my work with these sacred plants.
Yeah.
So take me in this thing. This is a little bit of a personal satisfaction, but I know that this will be also a valuable topic conversation for our listeners,
Okay.
because there are so many people in our sanctuary community, so many people that I've worked with over the years that have expressed just what you're saying, that they have to abandon often some of their most loved ones who are highly critical or won't come along. And I've seen on your social media, this blood is thicker than water, kind of
Mhm.
refuting this adage. So first of all, how did that come up in conversation within your podcast? And talk a little bit more about the real kind of context behind that,
Behind the word,
behind the saying itself, because it's
yeah.
incomplete.
So I think it didn't come up in our podcast. It comes up a lot
Oh.
in just life. Like the
Mm-hmm.
blood is thicker than water. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm gonna take it back a little bit to my in-laws kind of getting upset with my husband for taking up for me, and we're your blood. And I'm like, why do people keep saying that? Like, he's not allowed to defend his wife. Like, why is that? No, that's not how this works. And,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the people who I'm blood related to have been the ones who have hurt me the most. Like, I don't owe them more than what I'm giving to the person I'm choosing to be with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I kind of went down this rabbit hole of like, what does that saying really mean? Found a whole lot of sayings that we're getting wrong. A lot of them. Like one of them, this is interesting, I think this one kind of goes with psychedelics too, like curiosity killed the cat.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't ask questions. Curiosity killed the cat. But then
Right.
the adage to that is, but satisfaction brought it back.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No. So it's like, yeah, it did, but then it found the answers, and then now it's better than before. So it's the
Well,
same
shit.
thing. Blood is thicker than water. The saying that people use is, but blood is thicker than water. But the true saying is, but the blood is thicker than water, but oh my God, now I'm blanking on it. Shoot. Hang on. I got to Google this real quick.
Yeah, look it up. Look it up.
Shoot. I'm sorry.
That's what Google's for.
Yeah, you're right. Blood is thicker than water. Okay. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. So this started happening in the war, like people who like fought in World War I together. They went through so much together. So it's like the blood of the covenant, like that is thicker than the water of the womb that they were born out of. Because they went through fire and hell with these people, you know?
Which can be very related to the psychedelic experience working through. Yeah. I certainly know that there are individuals in the psychedelic community that are more family to me than my blood, you know.
Yeah.
For sure. My ayahuasca experience actually did so Peaceful Mountain Way out in Berea, went out there, and there was a beautiful woman who was I have never in all of my years, I have never had anyone sit for me. I have never ever it's crazy. I was thinking about that yesterday. Like how I've had fucking hundreds of doses and I have never had anyone sit for me except for in that one ayahuasca session. And in that session, which was very lucid, was talking with this young woman, her mother, I can't remember her name, but I was expressing how, you know, my mom basically just said me or this life kind of thing. And how there was always this kind of guilt and like, you owe me because I'm your mother, you know, you owe me a certain amount of respect or whatever it is. And this facilitator, as we were talking it out, said to me, God, it was so nice having that. She said, let me ask you a question. She said, you're a parent, aren't you, Eric? I said, yeah. She said, how meaningful was your life before you had children? And I was like, it wasn't. I was just fucking drunk and stupid, you know? And she was like, so who actually owes who, the parent or the child? And I was like, you're so fucking right. I am indebted to my children. They saved my life. My children don't owe me a goddamn thing. They didn't ask to come in this world. They didn't ask to be. No, I owe them. And it completely flipped the script for me on that whole situation because I had been walking around with a ton of guilt about abandoning or leaving my family behind. And it's like, oh, it's the other way around.
Yeah. I think that's, you know, I know this is like such a trendy word right now, but like the gaslighting, you know, holding that against someone, like, you know, it doesn't mean that you weren't there for me as a parent. You know, it absolutely does not. You were, but like in this moment, you were trying to hold me back. And that is not what a parent should be doing. You know, like how many animals literally like they hatch their birds or whatever, and then they send them off to fly. Like that's what you should be doing. You should be proud of me because now I'm not under your wings anymore and I'm flying. Yeah. Why are you angry?
Yeah. No, well, the irony is my mom wanted me to be a priest. Like growing up, it was always, you're going to be a priest. You're going to be a priest. And now we start a psychedelic church and she ain't so happy about that.
Not like that. That's not what I meant.
That's not what I meant. But
you're like, but you said.
Yeah. So talk if you would, let's kind of maybe wrap this up on a spiritual note. I would love to hear how you understand the spirituality of psychedelics.
Oh. I think that one is that one hit me the first time. Understanding that I am bigger than small and I'm smaller than anything in the world. Does that make any sense? Like I am big and I am nothing all at once. That was my first experience. Spirituality kind of hit really hard after that. And I was the only person in my circle of friends or family who was anywhere in the spiritual space. Like what's crazy about that is I used to say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
Mhm.
until I became spiritual. And I was like, fuck no, I wasn't. Like, that was nothing. Like, I knew there was something, but now it's very different. Just having faith in, we've talked about this before, but I call it the universe. I don't
Mhm.
say God. I just say the universe. Having faith that the universe has got me,
Mhm.
seeing things and being open to things that I never saw or was open to before. Um, Having incredible experiences with other people that just feel so spiritual to me that it's like it's so hard to explain. Um, the spiritual aspect of it to me was really just unlearning everything that I had learned up to that point, and it was really hard.
Mhm.
Um, I felt like I was going crazy
Mhm. Mhm.
because no one else, like, it was literally like there's that movie with Sandra Bullock where they're like, they have to keep their eyes closed the whole time. Did you ever see that?
I don't
Oh,
think
I
so.
wish I knew what it was called, but, like, there was a monster that was killing everybody, and the only way it could kill you is if you looked at it. So, like,
Oh.
you had to learn to be blind. It's like you blindfolded yourself, but there were
Huh.
these people going around holding people's eyes open, like, "Don't you see it?" And then you would die.
Oh.
But that's what it kind of felt like. I'm like, "Am I the only person
Mhm.
that's seeing this shit?" Like, that's feeling this way, like, I feel like I'm going insane. Why is no one else seeing this? Like, it was extremely isolating. So the spiritual awakening part of it that was what came first for me. Um, and it's funny because my husband now, the same week we did ayahuasca, he did another 5-gram journey, and out of all the times he's done it, this time, several weeks ago, was the first time he had a spiritual experience.
Mm. Mhm.
So he comes out of it and he's having all these revelations, and I'm like, "Yeah, I've been saying that." Like, so it's interesting because I think people think that if they do mushrooms, they're gonna become spiritual, and I'm like, "No, I don't I don't think that that's for everybody," but, like, it's weird when it does happen.
Mhm. And just because you're a spiritual person doesn't mean you have to be wearing flowing robes and tassels and bells.
Right. And I
Yeah,
think people can get there without psychedelics.
for
Like, I
sure.
don't, but that was definitely my catalyst into spirituality. And you're right. I don't probably look like your typical spiritual woo woo person because I still like nice things and I'm still a little bit bougie.
Mhm.
So I put my own spin on it in this, oh my gosh, connecting this back in the same way that with psychedelics in this space, and there's so much, judgment around the way that other people are doing things. I'm just doing it my way.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
doing spirituality
Yes.
my way, what works for
Yes.
me. And I think what's so good about this and being on the same team as everyone else is I might connect with people in a different way than you would, spiritually, emotionally, friendship wise, and in the psychedelic space. So
Mhm.
why can't there be room for all of us?
Ah, amen. Amen. There
I hate
is
to make
room
that go
for all
back,
of us.
but it kind of
Mhm.
goes back.
It very much does, it very much does, and that's been a big part of what I've tried to do is and when I say this to people that I work with at Sanctuary, they're like, "This is not to create some dependency issue where you feel like you've gotta come to me. I want you to be empowered to know how to explore this on your own because your spirituality is your spirituality. We can have this community of spiritual growth and progress, but nobody can tell you how to engage with the ineffable. Nobody else can put it into words. How could they tell you how to engage with it?"
Right. I'm gonna be honest with you, you know, I've been doing the Sunday services, the Zoom, and when I don't, I feel guilty. I'm like, "Oh, they're gonna be mad at me."
Yes, the plan
I
is
know,
working.
and I'm like, "Hold up. No, that's not what they
No,
are. This is not like I'm
no.
gonna get in trouble for not showing up to church." So I'm like, there have been times I've thought about, like, reaching out and being like, "I'm sorry I didn't come to church this morning," but I'm like, "Fuck no." Like,
No.
not what this is. That's not what it is.
Exactly. We have one member, a dear friend now, who came to us as an ex-Mormon, traumatized to the hilt, and she came to multiple Sunday services and said she's getting a lot out of them. And then she messaged me and said, Eric, she's like, I love everything that's happening here, but it's too triggering. It reminds me, just because it's on a Sunday, it's a weekly spiritual talk, it's too much like church that traumatized me. And I'm like, fucking don't come to church. You have the minister's blessing to not come to church whenever you want. Yeah, no, also maybe, I don't know if I should maybe I'll say it just in case she hears it. I'm not saying her name. But she, Mormon, God, have you studied, much about the Mormon life? And
I've read a little bit about it. Yeah.
I've met a number of ex-Mormons who were very sexual people, but were not able to express that, because Mormonology is like,
have you watched Mom Talk?
No.
Okay. There's like a whole group of Mormon moms who were like TikTok famous. They're Mormon influencers. And there was a whole drama about it because they had a whole like sex partner switching it up type thing going. And it was a very public thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you just search Mom Talk, it'll pop up the whole story. So I believe you. Like there's a lot of like,
crazy stigma and guilt and shame. And she finally got a divorce, and I said something to her like, I hope you're finally having all this crazy sex you could imagine. As your minister, I'm saying right now, I hope you're having all the crazy sex you can.
You're like that. I'm not a regular mom. I'm a cool mom. Like, I'm not a regular priest. I'm a cool priest.
Honest to God, the thing that made me finally say, okay, is when we were sitting around talking to somebody, and they were saying something like, yeah, when I was a kid, my grandpa was a minister, and I always thought that was kind of cool to tell people that my grandpa was a minister, because it immediately gave me some kind of clout or whatever. And I thought, wow, my grandkids will be able to say my granddad is a psychedelic minister. I mean, yep. Okay, cool. Let's do it.
I've like had this like thought. I'm like, when this does come up with my kids, like you're always like, are my kids going to think I'm like super fucking lame? And I'm like, no, they're going to be like, my mom has a psychedelic podcast. Like, so when all their friends are like, hey bro, you want to do shrooms? They're going to be like, no, I'm good. So also, I definitely think you should maybe get something going with that, like education around like the children, the teenagers, because I'm here for that.
Needs to happen.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, Leah, it has been such a pleasure. I think we could just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
But we'll leave it for another day. Get Courtney in the conversation, or let you all have a podcast together. She really, she's a wonderful part of this, and you are too. I'm just so grateful that we're all here in the same community, having the impact that we are.
Thank you.
What does psilocybin say to you?
Just love yourself.
That's interesting. We just posted a podcast today on masturbation.
That kind of works. All of these connections, man. You can't tell me this isn't connected.
For sure.
Love yourself. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leah.